What's up, everybody? I am not a software engineer, but I did figure out a quick and easy way to deploy a Google Compute Engine instance running the PALWORLD server to Google Cloud Platform, and I did it for free. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start this video by showing you the quickest way to do this. At this point, it is basically going to be to git clone my repo of PALWORLD Terraform found on my GitHub page, which is linked in the description of the video. And once you're there on your local system, you need to make sure that these prerequisites are complete. You need a Google Cloud Platform account, preferably with the free $300 credits, or a willingness to spend about $100 a month as configured. So obviously, if you want to do the free version, this is going to give you about 2.5 to 3 months of free PALWORLD server hosting in Google Cloud, okay? So maybe set yourself a reminder in your calendar, something like that, to go ahead and spin down this VM instance in about 2.5 months. In any case, we're going to move on to assuming that you have a terminal of some kind. I always use the Windows subsystem for Linux whenever I'm on a Windows system. And of course, I have Terraform installed in that terminal and Google Cloud CLI installed and authenticated to in the terminal as well. So once we have that, we can go ahead and load up our terminal. And as you can see, I have performed a git clone of the PALWORLD Terraform repo here, and I can do a simple ls, and we can see the files that exist within. So now I can open up VS Code, and I can take a look at what is here. So obviously, if you've used Terraform before, this should look fairly similar. The one thing that we need to do is to actually open up Terraform boilerplate.tf vars, and we need to edit our project ID to reflect the project ID we're using to deploy this GCE instance into, as well as its region and zone. So I will let you go ahead and take care of that at this point, and what we will do then is basically just rename this to terraform.tf vars. So at this point, I have made my modifications to reflect that myself, and I am now in main.tf. And at this point, back in the terminal, I can go ahead and just run terraform init. So that has succeeded, which then leads us to terraform plan. And we see that we're going to create 2 resources, which we will then confirm by doing a terraform apply. And of course, we will enter the yes keyword to approve. Now, this is going to provision the GCE instance rather quickly, and basically what's going to happen is if we go back over to VS Code, we're going to go through a whole bunch of stuff in the startup.sh script. So this basically runs when the GCE is provisioned, and basically if you just wanted to wait about 15 minutes, you could do that here, and then you could go take a look at the VM and connect to the IP address within PALWORLD. So at this point, you are pretty much done and can connect via the PALWORLD client within Steam to the IP address that shows up in Google Compute Engine, of course using port 8211. Now, at this point in the video, I'm actually going to do a deeper dive into everything that is going on here, and we're going to go ahead and start with main.tf. So, the reason that I had you modify terraform.tf vars to reflect your project ID, region, and zone is because we're basically setting these as variables within our provider, Google, and obviously modifying that boilerplate terraform.tf vars is part of the process to make sure that this is deployed to the correct location. Moving on to that, PALWORLD actually uses UDP port 8211 to function. Now, I actually deployed this using TCP and UDP at first, and I have found in my testing that you only actually need UDP. So I'm not sure how that has been accomplished by the developers, but it seems to work just fine with this rule here. And of course, you could lock this down to an actual source IP range or list that includes the friends that you want to play the game with if you want it to be super secure. For me, that was a trade-off that would actually be more difficult, so I just went ahead and accepted all traffic, and I went ahead and added a password to the server later on, which we will get into. But then moving on to the actual GCE, this is where the dollar figure really gets kind of crazy, and again, this will be $100 a month if you let it run past your $300 free credits. So keep that in mind. But basically what we're doing with this E2 custom for 8192 is setting up a VM that has 4 vCPUs and 16 gigs of RAM. We're also making sure that it has a public IP address, as you can see here with the access config being left default and just having this comment. It's basically just getting an IP address that will change. If you wanted a static IP address, you could add some additional configuration here, but as far as I know, it won't change unless you shut down the instance and reboot it. So as long as you leave the server up, it should be fine. We then set up a boot disk that is running Debian 10, and that disk size is 100 gigabytes. And then basically we point to our startup script, which is where all of the fun happens. And this is just a default that I got when setting this up via ChatGPT, of course. And I imagine some of the scheduling details here might be optional, but in any case, I've left them here as per main.tf. So then we go on to startup.sh, and this actually took quite a bit of troubleshooting. I want to say several hours of deploying stuff and seeing why it didn't work. Oftentimes, I ran into a lock issue with dpkg, and so I started adding these sleeps. As you can see, there's a 5-second sleep after most of the commands. And long story short, I decided to output this to a log file as well as part of troubleshooting. But once I got this to work, I just kind of left this here. So we're going to walk through this quickly. Basically, what happens when the GCE is provisioned with Terraform, we also run an apt update and upgrade, and then we make sure that we do the -y so that we don't have to do any human interaction, because we want this to happen in the background. Then we install software properties common and expect. And expect is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting in this script. We'll get to that in a second. We add the non-free repository and the i386 architecture, and then we run an apt update once more, which then allows us to move on to expect. So if you run the Steam command installation, you will notice instantly that it wants you to do a UI or a pseudo UI based installation that has the Steam license agreement. And since we want this to happen unattended, we basically need to use expect to look for the agreement of the EULA and then basically going ahead and just agreeing, right? So this may or may not be something that you're comfortable with. You might want to actually install this manually, but for me, I quote-unquote perused the agreement enough to basically make it okay to agree and continue. So then at this point, we create a Steam user, and then we run the installation as the Steam user. So that means we basically, and I could actually do just a login to the Steam user in the script, but you can also run the command as the user Steam, and basically this will install the application number 2394010, which happens to be the PALWORLD server. And then we create some symbolic links, which are basically just shortcuts. So then we check to see if this directory exists, and if it does, that means that the PAL server was installed. And we can go ahead and run this as our Steam user using screen under a new screen called PALWORLD running, which we can then connect to later to make modifications if we so choose. And if not, we can basically just connect at this point because the server, palserver.sh, is actually running. So I did want to make a quick point that this part right here is what takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So once you actually provision this in Terraform, you'll see that it was created within a couple of seconds, right? But in reality, it's doing a whole bunch of stuff in the background. So you will have to wait 10 or 15 minutes. And I'll show you what that looks like in the UI. So in the UI, I have a new virtual machine that happens to be called PALWORLD TFVM, which was defined in main.tf. And we can go down and actually find the ephemeral IP address, which is right here. And I can copy this address, and I can actually go into Steam and launch PALWORLD. So we see the splash screen in PALWORLD, and then I can go ahead and join a multiplayer game. And since there's no password, I can simply enter the IP address. Watch out for the space here. And I will go ahead and hit connect. Alright, so as we can see, it connected, and I am able to create a new character in the game. So I can go ahead and just hit confirm, and I can go to one of my presets to basically see who I want to be. I like type 11, so I'm going to go ahead and start the game, and then we are basically done with the setup. You can give the same IP address and port 8211 to your friends, and they can connect at this point as well. So at this point, if you wanted to actually make some modifications like adding a password or changing the name of the server, we can go ahead and do that. Now it kind of make sense to stop playing and actually drop back to the infrastructure to take a look at what that might look like, and I will do that now. So back to the boring stuff. Instead of actually playing the game, we can go ahead and hit SSH right here, and that is basically going to prompt me to allow my Google account to SSH into the GCE instance, so I'll go ahead and accept that. And I don't know if you can see this, but at this point I want to actually log into the Steam user by typing sudo su-steam. And so here I can type in who am I and see that I am Steam. And what I'd like to do is actually list my screen. And you can see that PALWORLD is running here. So we can see that screen here, and what I can do is attach to it by typing screen-r PALWORLD running. And then I can just hit Control-C, and that will actually close down the server. So now if anyone was connected at this point, they would be kicked because there is no longer a screen that is running this, right? So I can type in screen-ls, and you can see that there's no sockets found. So at this point, I'm going to go back over to my instructions, and we're going to go ahead and cd to this directory here. And I do need to modify the README a bit. I will do that in a moment. But in any case, I'm going to cd to this directory, and then what I'm going to do is copy the default PALWORLD settings to the installation directory. And I will do that here. And finally, I can modify this by doing a simple nano edit on that file. So if we go, and again, this is kind of hard to see, but if you go all the way over here, you can basically see at this point we can set a server password, and we can set an admin password, and then we can set our name as well. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and I'm just going to say demo pal server, and the admin password is just going to be demo password. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I will basically rerun our screen command here and create that screen called PALWORLD running again. And I will just paste that. And at this point, I can go ahead and exit from the Steam user and then exit from this VM SSH session as well. And the server is running, so we can double check that by launching Steam and then PALWORLD. Okay, so at this point, this is kind of a workaround, but I'm going to click on a different server that's password protected, as you can see by that lock, and I'm just going to type in our password, which is demo password, right? And I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to ask me to proceed. At that point, I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to enter our IP address for the GCE right here, and it will basically use that password I just typed in to connect. And as you can see, it works without issue. Alright friends, since I'm not actually using this GCE instance with my friends, what I'm going to go ahead and do is remove it. So if you set yourself a reminder for 2.5 months, or whenever your GCP spend is about to exceed the $300 trial that you have, remember to destroy the infrastructure that you have created so you don't get billed, and the best way to do that is by simply going back to your PALWORLD terraform directory and typing in terraform destroy. So that will basically prompt you that you're going to remove 2 resources that we have created with Terraform, and you're going to go ahead and make sure that that's okay by typing in the yes keyword, and we will do that now. And so it is going to remove those 2 things that we added, which were a firewall rule and a Google Compute instance, as you can see here. And that basically does it for this video demonstration. I hope that it was somewhat useful for you in your desire to roll your own PALWORLD server. Please go ahead and like and subscribe if this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.